Um, oh, recording in progress. Now we have to shape up. All right. Well, great to see y'all. Glad we could finally get together and meet. We've got lots to talk about, so we'll get right into it as soon as I can find my agenda that I was just looking at. First I need to go through and make sure and see who's here as far as task force members go. And I think, I'll have to check. I might be using it. Yeah, I need to get to a more up-to-date list. Doing a roll call, just make it known that you're present here, please. Start with Ron Campbell.
Give you the wave.
Gotcha. I can't read the list and look at the camera at the same time. Mark Elliott.
Here.
Great. Dennis Hickey.
Here.
Kim Parman.
Here.
Rose Ojeda.
Here.
Michael Schmier. No sign of him, huh? Christy said she couldn't be here. Michael Newgard.
Here.
Thanks, Michael. Grover Bornefeld.
Present.
Jan Lindstrom. Haven't seen her yet. Doug Jones, that's me. I'm here. Shonda Wild.
Yes, I'm here.
Paul Boundy.
Yep, I'm here.
And Gary Pekowski.
Present.
All right. Everybody's here. Jason, do you want to acknowledge any, the others that are here that are county staff and team members, et cetera?
Yeah. So tonight we've got Jim and Liz from OPSIS as panelists. We've got Cindy Becker with the county. In the other attendees, we have Mike Bork, NCPRD director, and our BCS director, Sarah. If they're needed, we can bring them in too. So back to you.
All right, great. Next step would be to approve the meeting summary from our June 24th meeting. It's been that long since we last met. Hopefully you all had a chance to look that over. Any comments or changes before we take a vote on approval? I don't see any. So if you're okay with approving the minutes as or the meeting summary as written, please raise your hand.
And you may notice that Mike Schmier has joined us.
Oh, Mike, there you are. Great. And Shonda, did you have any comments about the agenda, or are you okay with approving it?
It's fine, yes.
Okay. So we'll note the meeting summary is approved. So if you saw the agenda for tonight, it's a brief update from Jason to kind of give us a summary of where things are at the moment. And then the majority of the time is for questions, comments, answers, what have you. So while Jason's doing his portion of the presentation, if possible, unless it seems, but yeah, hold your questions till afterwards because there'll be mostly time for lots of that. So at this point, I think, Jason, I'm turning it over to you.
All right, thank you. So let me share my screen here. Oops. All right, can everybody see that?
That looks good.
Okay. All right. So thank you to everybody for attending on short notice for this meeting. We really appreciate you spending your time with us tonight. So we want to hear from everybody tonight, and we really value your thoughts and opinions in regard to this project. So I'll try to get through this presentation as quickly as possible so we have more time to discuss what kind of next steps are. So, but if there's at any moment, if there's something that's confusing or unclear, please chime in and I'll try to answer that for you as we go through. So with that, we'll get to our first slide. So this is a big problem right now. The issue is the original design with the library attached to the Concord school is not financially sustainable for NCPRD at this time. NCPRD needs more time to phase in its programs without having to move along at the same time as the library that we're trying to get built right now. So our proposed solutions are to build a freestanding library basically in the same footprint as it is now. It would be a larger footprint, but building it in that spot next to the school instead of attaching to it. And then NCPRD over time would phase in the rest of their project as funds become available. So this is kind of a map to where we start and where we're at right now. I'll try to go through this quickly. The original budget is the master plan budget. And then in July, we had our first estimate from the schematic design from our third-party estimator. Then I'll mention we have hired a CMGC, it's PNC Construction, and they've jumped right in and they've been doing a great job supporting us and helping us firm up some of these numbers. So we got their estimate in and it really was fairly close, unfortunately, to what the third-party estimator had come up with. And then you're gonna see the last column where it says CMGC with value engineering estimate. So that's a little misleading in the sense that when you look at the number for the Oak Lodge Library of the 16.1, that is basically the same library with some value engineering in it. But the NCPRD scope that you see at 13.7, that's really not, I wouldn't call that value engineering. That's really a scope reduction where we take out a lot of the scope and try to get a minimum that we thought we could do that would allow the library to be attached. So I just wanted to give you some more info on that. And this, to kind of add on to that, this $13.7 million, what it would entail would be the same, a new accessible entry, the same as kind of what we've been reviewing from the start. It would include a new gym addition and locker rooms, shared parking lot, park with playground, field, trails, some minor seismic improvements. Really, it'd be just seismic improvements in the areas that we would improve in the building. And it would still have shared common space with the library. What it would not include would be a complete seismic retrofit. We really wouldn't touch hardly anything on the upper floor spaces. We wouldn't make too many modifications to the NCPRD office space. We wouldn't have the park pavilion with the restrooms or the water feature and stadium steps. And we wouldn't have the large community room in this $13.7 million version.
Jason, there's a question that came in from the chat, and as you talk through this, this is, I believe, the value engineering option. Can you define what that means?
Yeah, so value value engineering, what that means is basically you take, you're looking at either a process or material that you're using for construction and seeing if there's either a better way to build it or a material that might be more cost effective. But you're trying to, in the end, get the same result, but maybe with a different material or process to build that, if that makes sense. Whereas what we're talking about a lot in here especially is scope reduction, where we're just not touching a lot of the existing spaces within the school. Let's see here. So this is a summary of NCPRD's funding. So what you'll see is in the original funding, that was the plan that was part of the master plan and kind of the plan we had been going with up until somewhat recently. And then the proposed funding is basically what NCPRD is proposing, and that's money they have on hand and are ready to use to invest in this project. And that's 7.7. So you can see the difference in where some of those numbers changed. And really it's the revenue bond is where the major change is. So as you can see, even with this reduced, scaled back version at 13.7, if NCPRD only has 7.7, we still have a $6 million shortfall to make this scaled back version work. We threw out some potential options to address this shortfall, which would be issue a revenue bond for $6 million and repay, but that would NCPRD can't afford to make that payment over time. It would eventually, they would be in the red fairly quickly if they did that. And then another option would be add the county general fund to for that $6 million, but that would add another approximately 400 grand to their yearly debt payment, and that would require the Board of Commissioners approval. And then the other option is they would have look for future consideration of a general obligation bond to complete the remaining phases. So that's NCPRD side. So let's talk a little bit about the Oak Lodge Library side. This is once again, this is if the library is attached, and some of the VEs that we would implement if we went this route would be to reduce the size of the library by about 1,800 square feet, change the CLT structure to steel, eliminate the radiant floor heating and basically replace it with the VRF system, straighten out the west facade, reduce the skylights by half, and replace the polished concrete floor with carpet. And that kind of goes along with the radiant heating. If you eliminate that, you don't have to leave the concrete floor. And then this is our current budget right now based off the master plan for the library. You'll see the one piece we did add was the state ARPA funds that were secured by Representative Power for the 0.75 million. So we're showing that added to it. And we're showing the revenue bond portions for each part for the library and for the general fund. And I think we also increased the Oak Lodge beginning fund balance a little bit also. So we're at 14.8 there. And with that VE'd version attached, we're at 16.1. Some potential options to address that shortfall would be We have about 1.9 million in contingency at this point. We could take about half of that and put that towards it. And then we could also further reduce the size of the library. And in conjunction with using some of our contingency, we could increase the general fund portion of the revenue bond by that 300,000 to address that shortfall. So the other option we want to talk about is the freestanding Oak Lodge Library. So we just wanted to quick go over pros and cons of having a freestanding library. The big pro is that we can build the library while allowing NCPRD to kind of phase in its project. We basically wouldn't be tied, NCPRD wouldn't be tied to the same timeline as the library to get built. And we would have a new library that's still larger than the current library. And we would hopefully be able to complete that new library in early 2024 for construction. The cons would be we'd have to kind of go back and design the schematic design, and that could potentially cost around 400,000 extra in design costs, and delay an additional 4 months on top of the 4 months we've lost already. So other losses would be you wouldn't have the ability to share space between the library and NCPRD. The park will be smaller since the library will be a little bit bigger than it is now. NCPRD building community room will not be available for some time. And then just less public space available, easily available to the library. So for the library, this is kind of a timeline or next steps that we've got. Obviously, we're here today for our task force meeting. Tomorrow night, NCPRD's DAC has their meeting to talk about this subject. We've got a library board meeting on the 18th. And then right now we're scheduled to meet with the board on a policy session on December 1st. And that's where we would basically go present the options and recommendations and get the board consensus on how to move forward. And then after that, if we went to this, I guess either option, but really for the freestanding, we'd go back and update our library design, and then come back to the board with that, with more information on what that would look like. And then obviously construction would begin probably sometime in 2023, or yeah, probably late 2022 or early 2023 on construction beginning and complete in 2024. And then for NCPRD, we got their meeting tomorrow. And then we are also scheduled on December 1st, same time with them to present the options and recommendations. And then some other steps they would look at after that December 1st meeting. Obviously, we redesigned the community center to fit the available funds that we have. Work with the DAC and community to determine program priorities, and possibly begin limited community center operations with the building as it is right now in mid 2022. So that's a lot of information. I'm expecting questions and from it. So with that, I will stop my share and hand it off to Allison, see if she can help facilitate any questions or concerns.
Oh, we've got a couple questions in the chat that I'll go through, but maybe Jason, before we get in, and I might invite Cindy to say a little bit more here too. I think a number of folks who are here also tuned into the the session with the county commissioners, because I think tonight, this serves as an update for the committee, but also there's an invitation from the board to share feedback and potentially recommendations if this group has recommendations. Is that correct? And can you maybe say a little bit more about that and what the ask is of the group tonight? Oh, Cindy, you're muted.
Cindy.
I know, it happens.
Hi, sorry about that. A couple of things. The board really wants to hear from you, hear your feedback, hear your questions and your concerns. And also they would like to, understanding that where we are today, understanding the financial constraints that we're under, what recommendations do you have? What suggestions do you have for moving forward?
So that's, if we get there tonight, that is an ask from your decision makers. Okay, I see hands. I want to clarify a couple things in the chat that folks might have missed. Grover had asked, Jason had mentioned that the library would be reduced by 1,800 square feet. And Cindy clarified that's from the original size was 19,500 square feet. So it would be reduced by 1,800 from that. Gary asked if the slides can be posted to the website. Yes, they can. Rose expressed some confusion on why the park has to be smaller if we don't attach the library to the community center. Jason, can you say a little bit more, and then I'll get some of the hands that I saw.
Really, it's because the library is going to have a larger footprint. So the current design is about 11,000 square feet. The addition, just the addition part of it, we'd have to make that library bigger if it's going to stand on its own. So we'd be looking at probably around, it just depends on what we can get, but I would say it's going to be at least, around 14,000 square feet. So it's going to stretch north. Really, it can't expand towards Spalding. So it's really going to want to expand north, kind of towards the park, and maybe a little bit west. Not too much, because we want to kind of be in line with the existing structure, but that's why the park would get smaller, because the building would have to grow into the area of the park. It's not going to be a huge amount, but it will be noticeable.
I might just add one comment, Jason, just
Sure.
Also being freestanding, it's pulled 20 feet away from the existing Concord building too. So that in of itself takes up a little bit of what it would have been some park space.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah. No worries.
Let's go to Gary, then Kim, and then I see another question from Mark in a chat. I just want to note for our attendees who are here, I see that some of you are putting your questions in the chat. It does make it confusing for us to know, and we want to focus our conversation on the questions that our committee members have, but we are going to get to public comment later. So if you can hold off on putting your questions in the chats, that'll help me know and get to all the committee members' questions first. Thank you for that. Gary, Kim, then Grover, then Mark's question. Go for it.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sure
Okay,
can.
good. I have sort of a two-part question. I would like to have some clarification about two areas. One, when Jason said if it's a standalone plan that we go forward with, that there'll be some redesign that'll cause a 4-month delay. But given that if the projects, the two parts were kept together, it would be a longer delay, I understand, because NCPRD isn't ready to go ahead with everything. So it would seem like it would take longer if the library was still joined to the school building. The other thing I wanted to ask about was, originally we were told over and over and over that by combining the two library programs or projects, the Gladstone and the Oak Lodge libraries, that there would be significant cost savings. And if the two parts of the current plan are separated, the library is a standalone, could that be coupled with the Gladstone construction as they originally planned and receive some kind of cost savings? Or would they be totally separate a different timeline, everything different. So it wouldn't be as cost saving. So that's my questions.
So to answer, I'm trying to remember what your first question was again. Let me answer your second question first. To answer the cost savings, right now, it does look like the way things are going, that Gladstone would probably start prior to Concord. And actually talking to PNC, and the way they've looked at it, they would have, I think they wanted to, we were looking at possibly staggering them anyways, to where Gladstone started at least a little bit before Concord, so that if you think of it, like if you're doing, say, concrete work at Gladstone, you'd want that same crew at Gladstone, and then they could just shift over to Concord when Concord's ready to do it. So it was staggering it in a way that they could more efficiently use those resources. I'm not sure if we can still do that, but that was some early discussions we've had with them looking at that. So I don't know if that answers your question for that one. Can you repeat your first question?
It was in relation to the 4-month delay that you said would occur if the project, the school building and the library were separated.
Yeah, I mean, really, because then it comes down to, do we have the funding? We don't want to proceed. We want to proceed with solid information on what funding we would have. So really, we'd have to feel really good about that 6 million. How do we infill that gap in the plan for that? So, so yeah, it could delay it if we have to wait a while to figure that out. So it's what you said is could happen. But with the 4 months, if we go ahead with the library redesign, we think in 4 months we can basically get to the point we're at with this current design, get finished with schematic within that 4 months.
Okay.
Kim, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a couple questions. I'm going to try to not take up too much time here. But my first question is, I'm curious to know where the budget discrepancy happened. It's a pretty massive difference between what we were originally told was available and where we are now. And it seems to have wasted a lot of time and resources in the process. So I'd like some clarity on that.
So I think, hi, Kim. As you can see from the chart that Jason put together, the big disconnect was in the revenue bonds. And I think the assumption going in was that there'd be general obligation bonds issued to repay the revenue bonds. And the NCPRD is not at that point to issue a single project-based general obligation bonds. They need to update their whole master plan, their capital improvement program. At some point, they will probably go and issue general obligation bonds, of which this project would be a part, but it's going to take a while for them to do that. And there was an assumption that it would happen just for this project.
Did something happen to change that?
I think it was, I guess it was a strategy that we're not clear on what the thinking was around putting that one project general obligation bond out there. It's just not done.
Okay, it's frustrating. I'll just state that. Yeah. I think something else that I'd like to bring up is the fact that we've talked a lot about how joining the library and the community center is supposed to be a savings in value. I think from the perspective of somebody that works in real estate and construction and renovating homes, I can say that phasing a project doesn't necessarily save money over time. In fact, it generally costs a lot more money over time. You just have to spread out the money available, and I think that also, to Gary's point about combining the two different builds, having one build happen and assuming that the same things are going to be needed at the other site at the same time is, I would never expect that to actually become reality unless you have two identical projects being built the exact same way. it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to retrofit one building. So I think the question at this point in time, and this is more a comment here than anything, is are we doing a big project badly? That's kind of how I feel about it. So,
and Kim, I just, the frustration that you all are feeling is beyond understandable. This whole project, I mean, going into it, I think there was the assumption, oh, we've got all this money, we can do this, and we've got this great design, and in an ideal world, if this all came together, wouldn't this be great? Absolutely great. I think the issue facing us is we don't have that money available, and so what are some options that we can do to either get there part way, or just or is it time to separate the two? As Jason talked about, the $13.7 million scope reduction still has the buildings attached, but we still don't, there's still a significant financial gap of $6 million. And the county is very committed to doing the library projects. And so the next option is, well, how do we get the library built? And NCPRD can do what it needs to do, but not connecting them in such a way that one has to wait for the other. So we kind of, went option by option, and that seemed to be the most feasible one so that we can start movement on the library.
I see some more hands. I did see, this is transparent facilitation moment. Jason, I saw a hand from Mike from NCPRD. Mike, would you like to come in to the meeting? Mike Bork? Yes, okay, we're bringing in Mike. I just sent you a panelist invitation. Hi, Mike, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, everybody.
Did you want to respond to any, I saw your hand out there in the audience for a minute. Did you want to respond to anything right now?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to make the general statement is I hate to be the guy that came in new into the job August 1st. And as I was looking at the first projects, Concord was one of the first ones I looked at. I got one of the first tours was in that facility. And as I started looking at how it was laid out, and I started asking the questions of how we were going to fund it, I was getting a lot of blank looks of, well, we don't really have a plan on how we're going to fund what was put into the budget. And so I was the one that had to basically start this process of why we're here tonight to say, I love the project as it was designed, but there were assumptions made at the very, very beginning of the project that were not sustainable. They were based on wrong assumptions and some flawed logic, as Cindy spoke to. And so I'm trying to look at this as a much more practical, how do we get the library on the Concord property? How do we get a community center up and running in a short amount of time that we can build on and add as we figure out where our money situation is? But as the project was, it was just not sustainable for the health of the district. One of the original scenarios I saw were we to have gone that way would have bankrupted and completely put our fund balance to zero in about 3 years after we assumed the revenue bond debt. And there's really the biggest problem operationally, just so that everybody understands kind of my full process, is operationally, we know that building is going to operate at a subsidy. We're not going to be able to bring in the revenue from room rentals and small events and classes being offered out of there. That's not going to be enough to offset the cost of basically even just lighting and heating the building and having minimal, staff and maintenance and janitorial. And so what we're trying to do is come up with a plan that still meets the needs of what the community identified. I've gone back and looked at what the top desires were, and I believe we can do nearly all of those outside of the gym, the new gym, I should say, but we can do nearly all of those desires with the existing building and do it within a few months once we take occupancy of the building to do that. spend a little bit of money at the beginning to make upgrades, just, more aesthetic, and then take the time to put an actual plan together that needs to be looked at as kind of a new design. And I would imagine the task force and the DAC and everybody is going to be involved in that process if we move forward with this separated project, because it is going to be a whole new different way to look at how the facility operates without the building attached, if that's the direction that it goes. So I hate to be the messenger that has to start new in the job and come forward with this message that the financial stability of the plan was never communicated properly to, it looks like, really anybody, about the fact that this was an unsustainable plan, whether it was a general obligation bond or a revenue bond. Both weren't sustainable theories of how to pay this big gap of $9 million at the beginning and all the way up to $14 or $15 million, or almost $18 million, I think, in one scenario. And none of that is feasible. So I want to be able to spend the money that we've got set aside for the project and are counting on for grants and SDC and land sales that we've got, that you saw in the budget. Let's figure out what we can do to create a really nice community center, but still keep the flavor and really the same structure inside of what's there now. And so that's the same thing I want to pass to the DAC members tomorrow is, I don't like being that guy that had to come in with the message, but it was the message that everybody needs to hear before we moved any further. And I don't know why it took me coming into the job to be that messenger, but that's the role that I had to assume. And so I appreciate all of your time. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Grover, and then I saw Dennis's hand, and then Ron.
Okay, good. First of all, thanks, Mike. And what I want to let everyone know publicly, I'm glad you were able to see the flaws, the misrepresentation, the lack of clear information, and brought that to our attention. So I'm glad about that. What I'm not clear in this conversation so far is it's muddled for me, not what Mike said, but in general, when we talk about we can do this, we can do that, but we're not making the clarity about if they are separated. Let's talk about what's the library. And you did, Mike, and I don't want to answer right now, but you did talk about it be this and that and costs and so on and so forth. But are you still talking about them combined versus I'm totally fine with going forward with a standalone library. However, I have to say that we have stuff from a little over a year ago that clearly said standalone was going to cost us more money for the library part than the combined part. And now I hear that, no, and we'll barely be. So I don't want to hear any answer to this. I just want to get it on the table that we were told clearly that our first choice of looking at a standalone was going to cost us way more money and we were much better off combining. Okay, that's piece one. Piece two, the whole idea about value engineering and making changes. You got to understand that most of the people on these screens have been working on this for well over 2 years. And we put a lot of time and energy, trust, faith, et cetera, in it. And okay, now we found out we were operating with lack of accurate information. And so now to take it away from us and say somebody in a back room is going to come up with new plans and we get to get a quick peek at it. Like I wanted to know why we didn't get this slide presentation before now. To see it once quickly and have to absorb it all, that doesn't work for me. We're partners in this and we're supposed to be well informed. So moving into that, the idea to assume that we're going to have to make the front of the building still align with the library, no, it's no longer attached. I don't support that assumption. We need to have the square footage required and not take more out of the park than we need to. So that would very well mean the library could stick out farther to the west than the existing building and not be tied to be an addition to or an add-on to a very old building. It can be a freestanding building. So in that, I also heard the thing about, this is Oregon and we're going to dump CLT for steel. I don't know what the cost savings difference is in there, but I actually think we should look at, can somebody help support what the gap is and stick with CLT, because CLT is in Oregon's future. And we got a lot of people in this county and elsewhere who support CLT. I'm not an expert, but I don't know why I just all of a sudden dumped that. Similar with Radiant heat, I thought in long term is more efficient, and it certainly in our cold winters and damp and whatever has a clear value. So to say that those are jettisoned and we have to just take that as like, well, that's what the value engineering is, as opposed to where do we play a part in that, the 2+ years we've got invested. So that's it. No, I'm not in favor of a smaller park. I think we need a lot more work on park. And as far as what we've gotten, the park is like a tail on. We got little bits about, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of people in the audience and elsewhere who are very concerned about what we're getting for park. The library, I'm still not clear. I asked the question, it's 19,500 for a library. And then you said, well, minus 1,800 square feet. Is that off of the 19,500? Because somebody in this conversation just said that. And yet earlier I heard it was, no, it's off of what the freestanding was or the addition was. So could somebody clarify what is, well, shake our heads, but what is, let's make it clear so dummies like me can understand, what is the proposed square footage of the freestanding library that's now being pushed forward, minus 1,800 without telling us to what? We don't know anything. So those are my questions that I'd like to have addressed. Thank you.
Grover, I think we've kind of got these 3 different models. And so your confusion is warranted. And I think we've kind of been mixing and matching some of the numbers. So we have the original attached model that you all had seen, and that's the one that you had wanted. Then we looked at the, is there a way to set, if we don't have the money, is there a way that we can kind of strip back the model that we have to see if we can do it at a reduced cost? And so the 1,800 square feet was taken off the 19.5 for that reduced scope model. Okay.
So you, just to be clear, so you're talking about a standalone library next to
No.
the, well, then please make that clear again. That still didn't make sense.
So the first model was that I think.
No, what are you proposing now? I don't care about first models.
Okay, so what we're talking about now is a freestanding model. The 1,800 square feet was when it was still attached.
Okay, but so give the number you're subtracting from, please. I heard, so you're saying from whatever it was as an attached and you're going to make it smaller than that. How many square feet was that?
So let me try to say it another way. We literally had the 19,500, which was a combination of square footage within the NCP, the Concord building, plus the addition of the library. So that all tallied up to 19.5. In our first attempt to keep the buildings together, we shaved off 1,800 square feet in that version. So
off of what, dear? Please, off of what did you shave it?
There was off of the 19,500, the majority.
It was off of the addition. The 19,500 square feet included renovation and a new addition. The 1,800 square feet came off of the addition. So the total is 17,700 for the attached version.
For the attached, but we're not talking about a standalone.
I understand, but one step at a time, Grover.
And so for the freestanding, we don't have an exact figure for that. That's really we're going to be looking at how much library can we build for how much money we have available, to be quite honest. And so we want to build as much library as possible for the available funding.
And what is that available funding, to be clear, because it's not in this presentation?
Well, we do know
it is the 14.8 million.
Yeah. So
for the library?
Currently, yes, 14.8 is what we have. We would hopefully be able to get some more funding with that, but that's what we're currently working with right now.
Okay.
And a simple way to look at it, Grover, is, and that's why it's important to know, the reduced attached is 17,700. We know if you're building a freestanding and not taking advantage of the renovation space, that costs less. The square footage is going to be less. So the overall square footage of a freestanding library is going to be smaller than the attached version if you're working with the same budget.
Okay, that is no more clear from after both of you speaking. What I
Okay.
want to know is what you're suggesting for a standalone current now going forward library. How many square feet do you proposing that might be? And I got you don't know, but against
No, I
the
think-
funding that you've got, that's not going to change.
Yeah, Jason just said around 14,000, give or take. We don't have the exact number.
I certainly understand, but to give
Oh,
us some
okay.
concept, because to say minus
Right.
1,400 square feet is, I mean, 1,800 square feet is that you're not even proposing we ever go that direction. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so it's a comparison of 17,700 to roughly 14,000 freestanding. So, you know, it's a net reduction of 3,700 square feet, somewhere around there.
I
Thank
think
you.
between 14 and 15,000 square feet.
14 to 15, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, folks. I do know, like, Grover, you managed to get in a number of questions in there, and I just want to kind of open it up for staff. There were some that, you know, it was no response was needed, but if anybody does want to respond to some of the other points, I know that there were some thoughts on, you know, materials being used. I also see a lot of other hands out there, so we can jump into the chat too if some folks want to respond in the chat, but just want to give some space for staff. Okay, I'm going to get some other questions, but I think, you know, Grover, it seemed like the intention of some of those was just to put it out there of like, hey, this is where you're at, and this is some of your recommendations or thoughts. Thank you for those. Okay.
Well, they were unanswered questions, just to be clear.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, let's go. I see a lot of hands. Dennis, I saw your hand go up. Did you still have a question?
Yeah, so thank you. So this is kind of a mess. It's a mess for the community. It's a mess for the task force, but my concern is with the greater Oak Grove, Oak Lodge community. This has been running for a number of years, 2 that we've been working, maybe 2 before that. And now in kind of the 11th hour, there's a change and we need to do something. We need to do something less independent of a plan to speak to the taxpayer, the community of people that we brought in by the numbers over the last 2 years. So one question I have, how are we going to message this with the greater community? So to go along with that, I heard in the meeting today, I might be sensitive about it, but to me, it sounded like people were using words on the task force like we created a platinum standard. I don't even know what that means. Like we put everything into this thing, which was not the case. Then I was a little upset by one of our staff members that alluded to me, it felt like the task force acting like, quote, 4-year-olds wanting a candy bar. What? So I think the biggest need, aside from questions on the project, money on the project, questions on the project, how are we going to communicate to these taxpayers in an area, because I know I taught at Concord. I spent many years there, in an area that might feel like we get the short shrift every freaking time. So I know I'm a little emotional about this thing because it is important to me. But more important is I don't live there. Those people are living there and they're dreaming about a park and a great community center and a library. And that dream is kind of up and washed. So that's one piece. 2, who's choosing what's going to be recommended? Are you going to give the commissioners any ideas that come through? If I was to put in 25 ideas, would those go through? So who's making those decisions? Sorry for getting a little animated, but It's what you get with Dennis, I suppose. Thank you.
Dennis, I want to honor your feelings. I know that this group is so passionate, and I hear the frustration in this group, and I know y'all are fired up. And that's okay. There's a container for this, right? Like, we hold this. I feel it, Grover. I feel it, Kim. Like, I feel the frustration from some of your comments. I think staff can also weigh in on this as well, and I maybe look to Cindy. But one idea, you asked about recommendations, and I think that there's a desire from your board for ideas. You have a protocol system, as a group on what constitutes a recommendation. I think if you also wanted to just put forward ideas that, without like, this is a consensus-based recommendation from this group, that would also probably be welcomed. But if you did want to, work together to come up with a set of recommendations, vote on them formally, and have them, we have a system for that, right? And I can certainly help walk you through that. Cindy, I think this might be on the table. I think it's important to air what the feelings that are here, some of the unanswered questions, to get the clarity that you need. I'm very conscious of the other folks who've been waiting patiently with their hands. So if we don't get to a place of recommendations tonight, we may be able to offer some additional space, maybe a shortened meeting, but really to come and to listen. And if the group does feel like they want to vote on some things to have it be a formal recommendation, we could certainly do that potentially next week. I know there's a series of meetings, and this is all kind of working through the governance systems at the county. But Cindy, is that still, and Jason, is that on the table? If that's something that the group would like?
Absolutely. The plan is that we would be going to the board on December 1st in a policy session and kind of walking through all of this. And part of the document that we'll be bringing is, what's the task force say? So what are their concerns? And then what, if any, recommendations do they have or ideas they have? I will bring all of that forward. So that will be part of the conversation with the board on December 1st. If we can't do that tonight, and you want to have another meeting to do that next week, would be great. We got Thanksgiving and all this, and so it's kind of a little bit, quirky in terms of scheduling, but we can certainly do that next week, Monday or Tuesday night. And again, so that what I don't want to do, if we don't have to, is reschedule the December 1st meeting. And so, putting it off even another week or two. So if we can do that, would be great. We are not going to be bringing a design to them on December 1st. What we're going to be essentially asking for, basically looking at the numbers, and unless there are some ideas from you or from the board about how to get more money, to be honest, then our path is looking at a separate library that we have money for. And so that's essentially going to be bringing what we're going to be bringing to the board in terms of here's where we started, here's where we are, here's what we looked at, here's our recommendation with what we know to date. And any information you want me to share, obviously, I will do that.
So folks, I think just putting it out there, Monday or Tuesday, if you would like to have an additional session. I'm also conscious that there's a lot of folks here that may be wanting to give public comment, which is another key part of our meetings. So we might not get to recommendation making. You can feel free to weigh in the chat and let us know. And I think if you're not able to make it, written comments from task force members may also be a great way to kind of just an informal session. We've done these before, right? Where you can kind of talk things through and listen and discuss ideas together. So an option. I want to note that Kim had a question in the chat, hoping to hear from OPSIS about some of the cost differentials between combining spaces and separating them. Rose also made a comment, would like to make sure that the county has exhausted all efforts to find additional legislative funding in 2023, CDBG funding for public facilities, etc. So Kim, we may have to circle back on your question, or maybe OPSIS can also just, we'll put a little mental post-it note there. Let's go to Ron, and then Paul had his hand, and Doug and Mark. Ron, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, first of all, it helps that most of the questions I had have been covered by Kim and Grover and related responses, also Gary, and also I really appreciated the email exchange earlier today, in particular Gary's comments and Mark's comments. I thought were right on. But let me salvage a few questions here from what wasn't really addressed. I don't think it was. First of all, just a comment that this, like probably the rest of the people here, it feels like the rug is being pulled out from under what was a very good project. And I have a lot of nervousness around the idea of trying to band-aid something together very quickly to get it underway. And I particularly have a problem with going to the commissioners for approval of cutting back this budget this far in 2 weeks, when we have just learned about this within the last couple of days, and the public at large knows nothing about this and will have virtually no opportunity to be involved. So one of my main messages here is slow down and give this a little bit of time, because you're stretching this out anyway. Give it a little more time now. One thing, about the plan itself, with whatever adjustments need to be made at this point, my preference would be to retain as many of the original elements of the plan as possible, even if it is being phased in. Otherwise, it is basically band-aiding it together. Stick with the original plan, make those adjustments that will be necessary to do it in phases if that's what is needed. But let's not just throw the baby out. Okay, and that's what it feels like is happening here. The idea of phasing, I support the idea of having a long-range plan with some things that are on a slate to be added later. And I was, by career, I've been a long-range planner myself. I've written elements of comprehensive plans. I have written a lot of park plans for Oregon State Parks. And those are 20-year plans, and they're actually designed to be built out typically over a period of 20 years. Unfortunately, what I have seen happen too many times over the years is plans approved, adopted, put on a shelf, and they never get implemented. And it has a lot to do with priorities. There's turnover in decision makers, there's turnover in management staff. And sometimes those plans aren't valid anymore because of changes in circumstances, but too often it has to do with the priorities of the powers that be whenever it's time to do something. So planning in many cases is a waste of time. We have a history with this county. I don't want to bring up the past too much here, but I can very well see the possibility of a plan for add-ons to this project just being lost in the future. I don't want to feel, I don't want to come across as being real negative about this, because I think this still has the potential to be a good project. My main message here is let's keep it a good project and let's do whatever it takes to do that. One more comment or question, I think it is, it's about funding. If I understand correctly, the main discrepancy seemed to have to do with the ability to go out for bonds, revenue bond or general obligation bond, if I heard correctly. So my question about that is exactly how much time, approximately how much time would be involved in actually getting NCPRD into a position where bond pursuing bonds is actually feasible. And then second, we're talking about a shortfall here, but it's almost like we're talking about all or nothing, NCPRD has only got $7.7 million and our budget is, I mean, that's about 25% of what the budget is just for the NCPRD portion of the project. You know, that's a huge discrepancy. Is there no middle ground here? I mean, seriously, is there no way that something in between, oh, well, we can't do any of this, or are we already there? Are we already at that threshold? And what is that threshold? You know, that sustainability threshold, what is that? Does anybody have a number?
Mike, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to turn my buttons on. The sustainability threshold is the money that we've got accounted for in the budget for the project that accounts for the 7.7. If we do a revenue bond, which is really the only option for small dollar amounts, in the, say originally 9.5 million, went up to 13 million. A $9.5 million revenue bond would carry about a $750,000, maybe $800,000 a year debt service payment. And as I talked about, we already know that the facility, just to operate as a community center, is going to operate at a subsidy like most community centers do. We'll be bringing in revenue, but it's not going to be of a sufficient amount to cover our expenses just to have the doors open to the community. And so to have an additional not $750,000 debt payment that we don't have any additional revenue coming in from other sources is drawing down our fund balance. And right now, round numbers, I think in the budget, we have $8.6 million in a fund balance, in our fund balance. So by doing the math and accounting for other losses, like the subsidy amount that we'd be subsidizing and others, the estimate is 2.5 to 3 years, we would be out of money completely. Maybe as long as 4 or 5 years, depending on when we had to start repaying some of the debt. But that's the unsustainability. Anything beyond this, the money that we've got budgeted through the money, we've got $3 million for Hoodview proceeds. The money that we got from selling Hoodview, we've got $3 million set aside for the project. There's about $2.5 million in the budget for SDCs, assuming we can get the DAC to adopt the project into a CIP list. Then there's some other grant funds and a library transfer. All of that adds up to that 7.7. That's what I'm calling the quote unquote cash on hand. But even those are still squishy numbers. To go beyond that puts us into a dangerous position financially in the very near future for the whole overall district. My hope is that you asked about a good timeline for a GO bond. 3 to 4 years is my hope, because there's several steps we need to do. We're redoing our comprehensive systems plan. We're going through an SDC methodology update. We're coming up with our land and open space plans, and creating an inclusive capital improvement outlay plan of how to actually do the capital projects over the course of 10 or 15 years. And all of that is going to take time. And there's also desire in the community to explore separating as a special district. And that would be another major lift that we would potentially have to look at. But whether we did that or not, still to get us into where we should be in a planning sense, to be able to go out for a general obligation bond that wouldn't just be for this project, it would be a cumulative, much larger bond that would encompass a lot of the new CIP priorities in the capital outlay plan that we create. That's where I'm saying 3 to 4 years is what I predict. But keep in mind, we would have that 7.7 to be able to make some improvements to the site immediately. It's just going to be a much smaller amount. And to what degree, there's still cost sharing that needs to be done for the overall civil work and parking work that would come out of that balance. There's planning money that would still be coming out of that balance. So it would be a much smaller amount of capital money to use. But I keep going off of the idea. I fell in love with the building as soon as I walked in. I didn't like right from the get-go the idea that we would have to gut everything for the seismic work, because I was afraid of losing the character of the building itself. And so my vision, and I've run a lot of these kinds of community centers, not a school specifically, but others of its size, is to use the building, make modifications if we need to open up walls to create larger spaces, things like that, but not to capital level improvements where we have to, redesign everything and get into seismic upgrades and things like that, major infrastructure. And then over the course of time, we'll do the major project. The other phasing would be replacing the roof, replacing the HVAC system, things like that we would do after we're in a bonding position. In a nutshell, that's kind of my overall vision for the next several years, if we get things moving in the direction that puts us, into a bonding position of, 3 to 4 years from now. So I hope that answered several of those questions. I don't know if I left any hanging.
Well, thank you for that. And actually it answered, I did catch a lot of what you just said when you were talking earlier, and you just helped with more information. I appreciate that. But what, so I guess what I hear you saying is that even if NCPRD was in a position to go out for bonds, there really is no middle ground. In other words, what if it's not the entire debt? What if it's half of the debt? That's kind of where I was going with it. But you seem to be saying that NCPRD isn't in a position to take on any debt. And if this project, another related question, if this project is being cut back the way that it is, what other projects are being cut back because of funding constraints also?
Well, every project has funding gaps, and I'm taking a hard look at all of the projects that we've got going on, big and small. And each project is different in its sources of funding. Milwaukee Bay Park, just to throw it out there on the table, it already has a much smaller funding gap of smaller amounts. The dollars were already there in various funds. From the beginning, dollars were assumed that would be available for this project that were never there. And so it's a different situation. But if there are difficult decisions to be made, that's one of the things that I think I'm good at, is trying to make compassionate, tough decisions. And that's what I'm trying to do, is be very realistic in the position that I believe that our district is in. Without a significant influx of other funding from somewhere, we can't take on any additional debt.
Well, and unfortunately, a consequence for the task force is that the task force also supported decisions that didn't, that turned out to be not based on the same assumptions either. So, and it's, like the rest of you, I'm frustrated about that.
I am as well. Just to put it out there, I don't enjoy having to be the guy that gives this message, but I also am the responsible one that felt I had to. We couldn't.
Mike, I think I've got a couple other folks who've been waiting really patiently. I also see Commissioner Savis, and we're closing in on the end of our meeting, and I want to get some public comment as well. Commissioner, maybe it's a couple brief comments in response, and then we can get some more questions.
Oh, I just prefer that people have their hands up for a while. Speak first. Thank you.
Okay, cool. We'll come back to you, Commissioner. Thank you. Mark, I know you had a question ages ago in the chat that we did not address. So why don't we go to Mark and then Doug, and I see Mike as well.
Thanks, Allison. Actually, I wanted to defer to Michael and Doug since they haven't had a chance to speak yet. So let's go ahead. Why don't you let them speak first?
Oh gosh, we're going to play that game because Doug did the same thing to you. So how about Doug and then Mike, and we'll circle back to Mark.
Fine. Okay, Mark. Thanks. I feel like you've been waiting also, and maybe have more to say than I do. And I'll keep my comments brief because I do want to make sure we have plenty of time for public comment. I really don't know what to make of all this. I'm sure the passion that Dennis has for needing something for our community, and the frustration that several of you have expressed. A big concern of mine is it's building a library is only part of the challenge. Being able to afford building a library. But we also have to build a library we can afford to run. And so if we do cost savings in the construction that make it more expensive to operate, we're still sunk. And that's not any good. I really do appreciate and agree with the idea of I'd rather have it take longer and maybe even have a smaller library if we could have a library we're still proud of rather than a Band-Aid operation. There's so much of the design that came into this and was looking like it was going to be really, really something. And then frankly, to be honest, what I'd hate to see, and I can't even support, is to build a brand new library next to an abandoned school and have that sitting there for who knows how long. And the whole point of doing this together was the joint savings in operation and the combined presence to the community. But at this point, I'd be starting to think about saying we can build a library anywhere else. And we've lost the connection between the library project and the Concord project. And I'd like to be able to find it back because, like all of you, I was very proud of what we came up with as a plan. I would rather wait until we have to find the funding and find something that is scaled back, phased, however you want to do it, but in a way that we still feel like we're giving the community and we are getting for the community what we originally intended. So I didn't have any questions. Those are just my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, Mark was still deferring, so let's go to Mike and then back to Mark.
Okay, well, thank you. My head is spinning at this point. I'm mad as a hornet, like the rest of us all are, I'm sure. I took offense when I watched the video of the policy session at some of the things that were being said about this task force. We've poured our heart and souls into this thing for the last 2 years. I've been involved with it for probably 4. And we took it step by step by step with assurances from the powers that be that the ideas we had come up with and the designs we had settled on were sustainable, that there was money for that. And we proceeded to put a lot of thought into coming up with the designs that we settled on and the BCC settled on. So I am mad as hell at what has happened, but I hear what you're saying, Jason, and Cindy. It is what it is at this point. I agree with Ron and Dennis and also Doug that I don't want to rush this thing. We tippy-toed through this thing with a hell of a lot of thought as we went through this before, and now it seems like you're trying to rush it through in a week or two. And I can't support that. Don't ask me to vote on anything tonight because I'm not gonna. I will abstain. I won't be a part of it. So slow down. Paul, I know you're listening. You need to slow down. This thing, it was too well thought out and the design was too wonderful for the community to just rush through it at this point. And I guess that's about all I have to say.
Thanks, Mike. Mark?
Oh, well, thanks, Allison. I guess what's helping me a little bit is to think of the library and the community center as separate projects, as separate entities. And I think where we are right now is they are really kind of separate. And it occurs to me that one of the reasons that the library was located, proposed to be located in the school, was that NCPRD's program could not fill the entire building, and it still won't. And so it made sense for us to consider that the library be located there in order to have full utilization of the building. And I think, honestly, hearing what's happening with NCPRD and their money issues just really makes my head hurt, honestly. And, you know, I have to say, quite honestly, I don't really give a shit what's going on with NCPRD. I am concerned about a library because the county has an obligation to build a library. They do not have an obligation to build a community center in the Oak Grove community. And so to me, I have to ask myself, does it make sense to even have the library here anymore? And I have to say that when the Walgreens closed on Oak Grove Boulevard and that thing sat there empty, I thought to myself, wow, wouldn't that really make a fantastic location for our new library? It really would have. That building would have worked. It had parking. It is right where we want it to be. It's in the center of the Oak Grove community. And so I have to say, I agree with what others have said. We need to slow down and give other considerations about what is the right thing to do now. When I've been an architect for 40 years, and I told people over and over again, you can do it right now, or you can do it right, but you can't do both. And so I think it needs to be done right, not right now. And so I think there needs to be consideration of other options beyond having it at the Concord School. And I have to tell you, there are people on the library board who did not want it here in the first place because they did not feel that it was an appropriate location for a library. So I'm just going to throw that out there as well. So I appreciate their help the time.
Thanks, Mark.
If I could just say something very quickly.
Go ahead, Cindy.
One of the things that we wanted to go to the board for essentially is to ask for more time. We had committed in August, when we talked to the board about we wanted to get more up-to-date estimates, that we needed a couple of months. And so as we're very close with Gladstone, again, it's a freestanding building, it's a singular project, we're able to, it's a small gap, and so we are going to recommend going forward with that because we have come up with ways to fill that gap. With this project, to be honest, we wanted more time because we don't have the answers, and the things that you're coming up with, even in this conversation today, are really important. And I think one of the concerns that we had was, would you be unhappy with us asking for more time? And it sounds like you wouldn't be, given what's going on. So I just want you to know we were not coming with a full package, if you will, on the first. We wanted more time. And so this is really helpful conversation.
Thanks, Cindy. Paul, I saw your hand go down and then come back up. Why don't we take a final comment from Paul and then we'll transition.
Yeah, sorry about that. I saw all the other comments were kind of along the line, and I didn't have the same passion or fiery commentary that Dennis and Grover had and Michael had. And I do want to say that I do support, and I really appreciate the fact that we might, something's got to happen here. The library really is that priority in my mind and I totally agree with Mark's comments that if we get nothing out of this, we're all going to be losers. We all lose, the community loses, but we really, really need to focus on how do we get a library out of this? And we need to reset to that. The budget that was approved was based on this shared project that we all sat here and agreed on would be the right direction to go because it saved money and resources. Now we have to look at this and say, okay, here's the right library for this community. What's our opportunity to go back and reset that budget with the board? I mean, it seems only fair that at this point, we can't try to squeeze a freestanding library into the budget that was approved for a shared facility. It just doesn't feel right. So if we can take the time and figure that out and make those decisions, if they're just going to turn around and say, hey, no, sorry, you only get this much money. Okay, let's get that on the table sooner rather than later. But it seems to me like we need to reset that budget. We need to really understand what our limits are to make this thing work. And work for the library and get this thing built.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, we're gonna get to public comment in just a minute. Let's go to Commissioner Savas. So if you have some.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight, and thanks for all the comments. And I'm sorry that it is what it is. I share your frustration. You have all heard very similar things than what I've heard. I've heard much more. And there's some people actually in the audience that are attendees that heard a lot more. This goes back several years. And I'm afraid to say a lot of what I want to say. And so I'm going to keep it short. The history of this, and there's people in this room, again, that know that. So I know I'm not alone saying this. The history matters here. We were told, like you all said, and we were told things and promised things. And frankly, I think that you ought to hold us accountable for that. This project needs to go. I don't know why. I really don't know why. I heard some of the things I heard here tonight, and I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but to state things that are not accurate, true, or researched, or frankly sensitive to the things, whether it was said here tonight or last night or last week, I think is very bothersome for me. So that's why you're all fired up. That's why I'm fired up. Anyone who watches this meeting is going to be more confused today, no matter how much research they did coming into the meeting today. I'm confused. I was under the assumption that there was a 19,500 square foot library that's going to be reduced by 1,800 square feet. I heard 17,000 square feet, then I heard 14,000 square feet. You know, that's a differential of a 10% reduction and a 25% reduction. Okay, I don't know. I'm not even sure what it is. I don't expect anyone else to. I'm not asking for any clarifications. I'm frustrated. I share your pain, and I am going to come out pretty strong on this as a commissioner and a neighbor and a member of this community. I live in this community. I've been a member of the district, the Parks District, since it was formed, as well as the library district. I'm not happy with what I've heard here tonight, frankly. And all I can say is that you need to make your voices heard. I encourage you to come to the commissioner meetings and have the commissioners hear this. They don't understand it. They don't know. They don't know. It's not their fault. They just don't know. You need to tell them your stories, whether that's in person or in writing, whatever you need to do. They need to know. It's very difficult in my position as a representative to share with my colleagues the importance and the gravity and the details here. You know it better than they know it. And that's not their fault. You happen to just know because you've been involved. And I thank you, all of you, for those of us who sat in a room at the firehouse 4 years ago, 5 years ago, roll up our sleeves. You all went out to libraries all over this region and did the math. We showed the former administrator the math, right? The former administrator and this current administrator held by and said, this project will go forward. It will go forward, okay? So here we are, the library being one aspect of that. The history of this park being a park, when Concord was first transferred as the sale, those promises from the perspective of the NCPRD with a district advisory board that was in hiatus at the time. Promises were made there as well. They said this park will go forward. And then in the meantime, other parks are going forward that we were told we couldn't afford, but yet they still went forward. 3 of them. 3 of them. If we couldn't afford them then, how do we afford them now? And then why is this all along the one that was going to go forward, which is ahead of a number of the other parks, is now not going forward? You know what? There needs to be some questions answered, and you need to hold us accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, task force members, and I'm looking to your chair and vice chair here too. I want to make sure that we hear public comment. We do have our meeting held until 7. If you have to leave at 7, that's cool. But if we do run a few minutes over, folks generally okay. There will be no more than 15 minutes. That is my solemn promise to you. But okay, cool. Thank you. I'm hearing some clear themes coming out from tonight, but I'm also hearing the need for additional conversation. So I think that invitation is open, and what I might suggest is staff can get together and kind of figure out the logistics of that, how long we might meet for, if I'm going to be there, check in with your with your chairs, et cetera. But I think even to Cindy's point of like, there's a theme coming through of more time, a lot of care about the library, some, mischaracterizations that have been made in board packets and things like that about things that the task force has said. So more conversation for this group to talk that through. And if you would like to make any recommendations to discuss that as well. Task force members, if you have a preference for Monday or Tuesday, I think both of those are possibilities before the holiday. I don't know the exact time. I'm guessing it would be around this same time that we typically meet. Cindy and Jason are nodding. So yes, let's consider 5:30. Let us know in the chat what works for you. And I'll start to roll us into public comment to kind of do an informal, what works best for folks. That would be Monday or Tuesday of next week, starting around 5:30. All right, so I do want to take some public comments.
Allison, could I just make one comment there?
Go right ahead.
Happy to meet Monday or Tuesday myself. But we did receive a lot of information. I took a few screenshots, but this requires a deeper think. So Cindy had mentioned going to the board, the commissioners, and asking for extended time for this body to talk about what to do next. So I don't want to feel like we're going to meet for an hour and a half. I'm not really prepared to offer much more at this time, but I know there's much more that needs to be offered. So Cindy, do you see the commissioners going to the commissioners and saying, the task force, we as staff, the neighborhood, we need more time to talk about the new reality?
Yes, I think that is very appropriate. Again, we were initially trying to balance going ahead with Gladstone, and so what do we need to do something with Oak Grove and the library, excuse me, and the NCPRD, and so here are some options. But to be honest with you, if we had more time, we would be happier as well. But we were concerned that you all would want to get something done. So if you're saying we need more time, then we're happy to accommodate that.
So that's great to know. I'm assuming that the task force would be happy with more time. I'm not opposed to still meeting Monday or Tuesday or any amount of time before the recommendation thing happens. But okay, thank you.
If other folks have thoughts on that, it sounds like the message to the board can be, we need more time and we need more time to discuss so that folks don't feel rushed into something. I'm gonna recognize that and thank you for elevating that, Dennis. But if folks would still like to connect as a group to talk that through, or maybe how to frame that message for the board as well, if you'd like to meet, if that's still a possibility, staff, or it can just be more time.
Well, it's more time, and I think an important thing that was brought up, and I think it was by, I'm sorry, it was Mark or Mike, but maybe you don't want to be on the site. Again, I think what we were trying to do, one of the main reasons we separated is we want to focus on the library. We do have money for the library. What can we get that aligns the community's desires with the available funding? And the best way to do that, we felt, was to focus on the library. Well, that was a conversation stopper.
Well, I think I'm hearing what Dennis is saying, and I guess I was feeling the same way. If we're meeting again Monday or Tuesday, I'm not sure myself that I will have a whole lot new to add. We do need to have more conversation, but I think maybe some time to ponder, but also some more input following up on this. The DAC is meeting tomorrow. The Oak Lodge Library Board is meeting on Thursday. I'm going to be out of town with my brother who's flying into town to visit next week. I'd prefer not to meet, but I can squeeze that in because, you know, Zoom, yeah, I can meet no matter where I am. But I don't want to have us meet and then spin our wheels. You know, we all have things to say and we all have things on in our hearts and minds. But we want it, if we're going to spend the time, and especially if we're bringing in people who are being paid to be there, we don't want to waste their time and even more money on the project. So that's something I'd definitely like to have be considered. So I recommend actually we wait, and we can amongst the group see about coming up with some dates, maybe even a month from now, you know, just to spread it out and have some of this. But you know, it's important that we keep all what's happened tonight and clear in our heads, and so we're not waiting too long and then we say, well, where were we? But at the same time, I think it'd be helpful to make sure that we've got more concrete things to be working with.
One of the things that we could do if you choose not to meet next week is that Allison and Jason and I can get together and put a memo together and say, this is what we think you said, this is what we heard, send that to you and see if we captured your thoughts. Again, if you don't want to meet next week, that's another option.
I also want to note that there were a couple questions that were kind of rhetorically asked as unanswered questions, and then some actual questions that folks had that were posted in the chat. Team, is it also possible to provide in that memo or as a supplement to the memo, like written responses to those questions? Yeah, I'm thinking about Kim's questions, some of Grover's questions that we still have outstanding.
Yep.
Folks, how do we chat comments? Chat comments will be included in the meeting summary, Grover. So we'll be sure, Jessica's here taking notes, and we'll be sure to save the chat comments. So generally, do folks feel okay with not meeting next week, but instead a memo being developed of what we think we heard you say and sending that out to folks so you have an opportunity to respond, as well as the team providing written responses to your questions?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we'd love it if you want to meet next week. That's the ideal, but if you don't, that's the alternative.
Okay, I saw some thumbs up to that. So, and then that memo, once it gets kind of approval from folks, would go to the BCC. And Cindy, you're the person who reports to the BCC.
Yeah, yeah.
Question. Okay, cool. Rose, I see your hand, and I also know that folks are waiting patiently for public comment, but go ahead, Rose.
I was just going to add that in the memo, I think there was still a lot of confusion again, which I mean, I was really confused, but I didn't want to just spend way too much time diving into those details. So whatever, your memo should provide more details explaining, you know, what happened, where the cuts are, what is changing with the square footage, and you know what is proposed. Again, it's just an overview along with the budgets, where the funding is coming from. And also, again, I'm going to just keep repeating myself, please identify other funding options. I haven't heard, you know, the legislative session is coming up in 2022 and in 2023. I have successfully lobbied our senators for funding from the feds, and I've also successfully lobbied our legislators for funding for our housing. So, and then there's also the CDBG public facilities funding. There is also federal funding coming down the pike for more economic development, public infrastructure. So these are all complicated. There's a lot of different resources that could be pulled together to make this happen. I really want the staff to dive into all of that and to explain all that to that analysis to the task force.
Rose, we agree that there are a host of possibilities out there, and the question becomes time again, because they're not going to be available now, they're not going to be available next month, and so that really becomes, you know, we were trying to come up with what's the real money that we have today, what can we do with that? If you want to wait for other possibilities, we can certainly do that.
I guess I I want to be a little unreasonable here because I think what the community wanted in terms of the library and the community center was really important. I mean, the library is extremely important, but so is the community center and all the amenities that the community center is going to be providing to the community. So I just really feel like we really need to exhaust all our efforts to figure out those resources. And what if we waited another year and we were successfully able to get all those federal resources together or
Sure.
state resources together? So I just, I just hate the thought of losing what we all really desired, not just the task force, but the community also.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Okay, folks. I'm going to roll into some public comment. Sound good? Okay. I know that folks have their hands up. If you would like to give public comment this evening, raise your hand. If you're a staff member and you'd like to, if you'd like to share some comments as well, maybe you can hold on those for a minute. Thank you. And we'll get public comment and then come back to anybody else who'd like to speak. So I see 2 hands up. So Chips and Stephanie, I'll unmute you in a second, but if you would like to give comments, you can raise your hand. If you're on a phone, you can press *9. And let's go to Chips. Chips, I'm going to allow you to talk and I'll give you about 3 minutes. Chips, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, good evening. Go right ahead.
Hi. Hi, everybody. This is pretty extraordinary, I have to say. This is an extraordinary session. I'm here with a hat on from the former member of the library board. I'm really concerned with what I hear right now and with so many things, but the first one, let's just start. My big concern, I think right now, moving forward after I listen to all this, is why are the same people are going to be in charge of the library in the future that have really created this cluster mess up? It's kind of extraordinary to me. I'm looking at all the people on the panel. I don't know who was involved in the library and who was involved in Concord School, but if we're separating them, I mean, this is the lowest competency of people that I have seen, not you guys. I'm talking about the people who made the decisions. And yet they're going to be the same people, I guess, who continue to make decisions for the library. That's not right. I think that the library should be separated. My big concern, I'm sitting here holding the original, survey that was taken and the results of the big meeting that we had. The largest survey that I think that Clackamas County had done is over 700 people. And there was no request for a gymnasium, none. I've looked through it, and yet it's on there. So the NCPRD is making decisions, and I don't really think they should be making decisions for the library because that's a different group. They seem to be concerned with sports. That's a really big one. When I was the chair of the Board of Trustees of the library, I went to see all the libraries here. I went to see all the new libraries that had been built in the last decade in Northern California to see what they all had in common, because there were some extraordinary things. One of the things that I noticed is that they were all opening up to sylvan areas with beautiful trees. That's what we thought we might get. And yet what NCPRD seems to have put in there is a playing field with a toilet in the middle of it. That's what this library would open up to. I mean, where is our feeling of sort of great possibility that we had? I'm very surprised at the current library board that just sort of has been watching this. Does nobody want a great park with an amphitheater or something that will respond to the library like all the other good libraries have, even the one down the street in Milwaukee? We get a playing field. I mean, this is just not being done right because NCPRD is doing it. They say they need now. I want to separate it too. My thoughts before it was separated was, why are they putting money into a gym that nobody asked for? And then I heard Mike saying because they need a profit center. Well,
Chips, that's 3 minutes of time.
all right.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us. Appreciate your passion.
Well, yeah. Okay.
All right, let's go over to Stephanie. Stephanie, I'm going to allow you to unmute. Good evening, Stephanie. Can you hear us?
Thank you, Allison.
Hi, go right ahead. 3 minutes for you.
My name is Stephanie Kurzenhauser, and I'm sort of a touchstone from the past. I was the vice chair of Oak Lodge Community Library Advocates. I founded the Friends, and I've also served on several county boards. I share that because I have a particular lens through which I'm looking tonight, and I want to acknowledge what I perceive to be an egregious betrayal of trust on the part of the county, and what I perceive to be a disparaging portrayal of the task force. I was absolutely heartbroken and grief-stricken to read the piece in the Clackamas Review. And I want to thank all of you with my fullest heart for the extraordinary amount of time, energy, and brain power and heart that you have put into this project. I want to echo Commissioner Savis's comments, and I would urge you to be as strident as possible. I do not think that you need to accept any of the potential options from the county. Please, I urge you, the way that one can best deal with the county is to challenge them. And the only reason your task force ever came to be was because of political activism in our community. It was going to the commissioners and challenging their paradigms of thinking, and ethics should demand values-driven decisions around equity. Your area has been underserved for such a long time. No more excuses. I do not believe the money can't be found. I have seen money magically be found for other projects. So please, I know you are already so beleaguered, and I have enormous compassion. And I hesitate, I'm reticent to even stir you or request that you continue fighting or to stand up for what you believe you deserve and justly deserve. But I would kindly request through Commissioner Savis that the commission consider a public apology for the way that this has been portrayed. There was an error, and again, it was an egregious error. And I did not hear at any point an apology from county staff during this webinar. I heard empathy expressed by Cindy and Mike. I never heard accountability. So please make sure that you get that, and please raise up your voices. And I thank you so much. Just please hang with it.
Thank you, Stephanie. All right, I don't see any other hands from members of the public out there. So with that, I'll close the public comment period. I do see Staff Sarah Ekman is in the crowd. I'm going to bring Sarah in to the meeting. But I know that we are over time, and folks may have things that they want to go. You might want to get on with your evening. So if you need to go, do what you got to do. But I will turn it maybe over to your co-chair. And if you want to take some additional comments or chat with Sarah for a little longer, I can certainly stick around. But Doug, I think this is your call this evening.
Doug.
Also, hi, Sarah.
Hi. So my camera, as it switched, cut you off just for a second, Allison. So do you want me to speak, or Doug, are you speaking?
Sarah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. I wanted to touch base, having listened to this all, just to underscore the seriousness with which we as county staff take all of this, and thank all of you for being here, for going through this conversation and just sharing your very candid feedback. As Cindy said, we value everything we've heard today. We value all of you. We've taken so many notes and so much information from all of you, and just really appreciate that. This is a big shift. It's a really big shift, and we understand that. We understand the high levels of frustration, the feeling of a loss of trust, and we want to get through this in a way that rebuilds that, and that we can come out the end with positive community projects. And so I just wanted to put that out there I did not introduce myself. I'm the interim director with Clackamas County Business and Community Services. And so the Oak Lodge and Gladstone libraries are part of our department, which is why I'm here today. And also, I want to thank the staff who are here, Cindy and Jason and Mike and everybody who's also here. This hasn't been anything that any of us have taken lightly, and everybody has worked so hard to bring you what you have today. And so I know it's not perfect, but ask you to bear with us as we prepare the summary to get back out to you and then have these next conversations. So I just wanted to extend our thank you and let you know that we're very intent on listening.
Thanks, Sarah. I think I'd speak for our task force in recognizing that you and Jason and Mike and Liz and so many of you have come into this fairly recently, and so those of us who've been putting in years of time into this, that was one thing that was clear at the meeting. And sorry, Cindy, you as well. I'm trying to think of who else coming to this. That at the policy session last week there wasn't even anybody at that meeting who could say, "Oh yes, SHPO, we'd had them come talk." The commissioners asked, and nobody could, because there's not that history there, unfortunately. And Jim, it's been good to see your face as being through this through so much of this. You and Allison have really been inspired those of us on the task force and got us where we are, except for not where we are today. Where we came today, it's a different place. And Commissioner Savas as well. I want to acknowledge that your support through this, because you've been to nearly every meeting from back when we were meeting in person. There's a lot of people behind this. We've got a ways to go. But Stephanie even was there at the beginning, was a task force member briefly. Stephanie, we haven't forgotten that. We appreciate your continued passion, as well as the others in the panelists who, whether you spoke or not, but have been attending, trying to just make sure you're giving this your attention. It means a lot to us as task force members, because ultimately we're representing the larger community, and as many people as we can have involved, the better. So for now, we'll hold off. We haven't set another date yet for a meeting. We will wait for some feedback after tonight's meeting, and then go from there. So until then, we'll see you all next time. Take care, everybody. And thanks so much for all your passion tonight. It was really inspiring to me.
Same.